So yeah, welcome everybody, and it's another junior developer happy hour. We started this back in the springtime, back when COVID hit and there were a bunch of crazy hiring freezes and a bunch of people were getting laid off. Both Sam and I independently were trying to help junior developers because we both remembered what it was like trying to get a job coming out of boot camp, and then just recognized it's even crazier times right now. So our goal is to answer as many questions and share as many resources as we can with people, so that everybody continues on this goal of theirs to get a new job. Because I don't know, I feel like there can be a lot of unnecessary hurdles, and it's awesome that everybody here is obviously taking so much initiative and investing in themselves. So you totally deserve to get that job. So that's enough of that backstory. Today, I haven't even opened up the little chat, but I imagine everyone, whoop, I don't see the chats yet for our Slido. I can post it, or if someone beats me to it, that's cool too. The best place for people, since this is an AMA format, ask me anything, ask us anything, best place to post questions is going to be in this link. I see Brian, thank you for sharing it. And that is just so that we can let people upvote questions as well, and we can make sure that we're getting to the questions that the most people are interested in hearing. Any like follow-up questions to what we're talking about, or if people have links to the resources, if we have links to the resources that end up being brought up, that can go in the Zoom chat. And I think that's about it. We like to, at the end, if you're able to stay until the end, that's the time when we like to invite people off of mute, and they can y'all can introduce yourselves, and we can get to meet you a little bit better. Yeah, cool. Sam, do you want to really quick, again, talk about some of our upcoming meetups, just in case people are interested in hearing?
Yeah, and I mean, you can give just like a brief intro of yourself, like just where you work and stuff. I think we missed that last week, but I think we should at least do that.
Oh yeah, okay. And yeah, I mean, I've been called by name, but hi, I'm Braidy. I'll introduce myself at least with my name, I guess. I'm a front-end full stack engineer at Nordstrom Trunk Club. So I myself went to Dev Bootcamp, and that was back in 2017. So since then, Trunk Club.
Yeah, and I'm Sam. I was a front-end engineer at Lyft until yesterday. I've been a software engineer for 7 years. Taking a break now. So if you go to my LinkedIn, I'll post my LinkedIn if we're not connected. I just changed my status. Now I'm software engineer on sabbatical. So yep, that's an update for me. We decided we're not going to give the long versions of our intros anymore, since a lot of people know our intros. And if you don't, you can check out our old videos on Braidy's YouTube channel. You can drop that link now, Braidy. We post the recordings. We post the recordings. Oh, we post the recordings on Brady's YouTube channel. Eventually, sometimes it takes a while. Brady timestamps the YouTube videos, and yeah, so we're a little behind right now. We can probably post our longer intros maybe on the FAQ. I don't think we have it on there. Maybe we can record a video with just our intros and put it on there. I don't know. We just want to get to our guests faster in the meetup. So before we get to our guests, just to remind you, next week that we have Lee Richardson from Headspace. So I know him from Hawaii. Hawaii is a strong network too of people. So he's gonna come next week, and then we're taking Christmas weekend and New Year's weekend off, and then we'll be back next month. We already booked some for January. We got Leanne Edwards from App Academy, and we have Tigran Sloyan. I think that's how you say his name. We'll see. He's the CEO and founder of Code Signal. So that's all the events we have lined up. Now let's get to our guests. We got 2 guests today. Both recent bootcamp graduates. We got Genna and Emily. So we can just go in order. You're in that order on my Zoom screen. So maybe Genna first, just brief intro, maybe at least say what bootcamp you went to, like whatever you want to say about yourself. And Genna also, if you could, where you work, and Genna, if you could tell us a little bit also about year 1, the program.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Genna. I went to Rithm School out in San Francisco about 2 weeks in. So I was supposed to go in person about 2 weeks into boot camp was when COVID hit and everything transferred to online. Let's see, I work now as a product engineer at Fertility. Product engineer is basically full stack engineer. I'd say the only extra thing that I do is a bit more of like designing the product. Let's see, I got my job through connecting with this company called Year One, which Sam just spoke about. And I was given their contact through the career coach at Rithm School. And basically just sent a link like, hey, apply. This company is trying to help bootcamp grads basically connect with companies. And that was, I guess, maybe a month after I graduated. I was sent that link, and through my process of trying to get a job, at least through the first month or so, I was having trouble getting any phone screen at all, because my background, I think maybe my resume, I guess that segues into, my background is in modern dance and fitness. So I was a professional modern dancer for, I guess, like 5 years since I graduated college out in New York. And then I moved here about a year ago and was mainly focused on yoga and really software engineering. I was studying to go to a boot camp. And so, like I said, I was having trouble getting interviews at all, like any phone screens. And so year 1 was kind of perfect for me because their goal was really just to connect me with companies. I can talk a lot about year 1 as we go. At least I'll give an intro now, kind of as just what is basically that you interview, they screen you technically and behaviorally, and then they'll send your information out to pretty great companies. I was connected to a company I never thought that I would be able to work for my first job. It's awesome at a Carrot. And yeah, did I say everything that I think you asked? I think so. And I'm happy to be here and happy to connect with all of you. I'll post my LinkedIn. I think that it's actually in the invite link on here. And I'll also actually post a link to year 1 to sign up. Like I said, I'll talk a lot more about it, but.
Someone just posted the link.
Oh, okay,
thanks.
amazing.
Thanks again, Brian. He's on it with the links today. Awesome. Emily, you want to give a intro?
Sure. So my name's Emily. I actually think there's a lot of similarities between my background and Genna's background. I'm a violinist, and I grew up in Canada and came to the US to perform in music, studied that in college, ended up in Texas for more college for music, and then I've been here for a while now. And I've always kind of had an idea of wanting to learn to program in the back of my head. And I would say that I, found resources for many years. Like more than 5 years ago, I started doing little courses here and there before I finally went all the way into a boot camp, which I did Springboard, which is sort of similar to Genna also, because I think it's the online version of Rithm School. I think they're sort of related. And so it was right before COVID hit, just like Genna, that I started. It happened to already be online only, and it's self-paced. So I didn't have to make any adjustments, and they didn't have to make any adjustments, but it worked out for COVID. And I graduated, I think, the end of September, and did an interview for a company called Ambit Energy, which is, it got bought out by a bigger electricity company. So they have the majority of the electricity in Texas, and they have like all the different smaller companies, one of which is Ambit Energy.
Cool. Thank you both so much for being here. I guess we can just get started with the questions. We have a ton of questions already. So first one here is, how did you both structure your schedule post bootcamp, with as many specifics as possible?
Sure, I could start. Okay, so I guess mine was, it kind of changed as I went along. I first tried to really just kind of separate my day in, I'll start with maybe some leak code algorithm practice, and then, have an hour or so of applying for jobs, and then another hour or so of, working in React or front end or just building applications, that kind of thing. That morphed because I started to focus more on leak code and less on building. Now, this is just really specific to me, but I just preferred to spend time on leak code. I was having, like I said, a lot of trouble getting any interviews. And so I just kind of started to just spend my time on leak code, and I stopped applying to jobs as much as I was in the beginning. So yeah, my schedule kind of became a bit more of a lot of leak code and a little bit of reaching out to people on LinkedIn, plus very minimal applying. I don't know, I hope that's helpful. I would say, like, my advice would be to practice leak code, to practice, in my opinion, algorithms and stuff, because that is what comes up in interviews a lot. I guess if you're going for full stack or backend, I'm not sure about specifically front end stuff, but yeah, my schedule is kind of all over the place, I guess. I tried my best to add everything in, but like I said, towards the end, it kind of morphed to just focusing on practicing, code problems and networking as much as I can, I guess. Yeah, I hope that's a helpful answer.
Why did you decide to put more effort into leak code when you weren't even getting interviews? Because that seems like that would be a step if you were getting interviews and you were failing the interviews.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's because it's what I loved the most out of software engineering, and I just wanted to do something that made me feel happy and good and excited about the journey I was taking. And I did know that eventually, if I just kept the momentum and kept trying, eventually I was going to get interviews, like, right, unless I completely quit. And so I kept trying and kept trying. Eventually I did get interviews, and the result was, once I got interviews, I really didn't fail them, which was cool. I was able to continually, like, move on, at least through the first few technical interviews, because of that kind of leak code obsession I just went into.
Awesome. What about you, Emily?
I was thinking it kind of all blurs together, I think, because my bootcamp was online. So I was like in my office working on it, and they encouraged us to network and apply for jobs before we finished the bootcamp. And then, once I was officially done, I would want to add something to my projects, and I'd still be networking. So I don't really remember exactly how things changed after, mostly because it was strictly online. But I did try to focus on one thing at a time. I don't know if it was necessarily better, but it worked for me. Like, when I was working on a project, that's what I did that day. And then the next day I would find a bunch of jobs and apply. And the next day I would do leak code, because I found that if I was jumping around too much, that I wasn't nearly as efficient, and I just ended up taking time getting in the mode to focus. So I hear a lot of other people say I spend an hour here, an hour there. For me, it worked better to split it up into days. And today I'm going to accomplish this goal as much as I could. Obviously, I didn't finish a project in a day.
Yeah, because I don't think there is a silver bullet. Like, this question comes up a lot, actually, in this meetup, and you kind of got to figure out what works for you. Like, Genna found what works for her. She got happy from doing the leak code, so she went full blast on that. Yeah, so everybody has their different strategies, what works for them. You just gotta try and figure it out. But it helps to hear like how everybody like did it, because then you can try out what they did and see if that worked for you.
I do like the idea of thinking, like planning maybe a week ahead, whether it is going to be planning like this hour I'll do this, or this day I'll focus on this, but planning it ahead. I like to write it down like in a calendar or something. I remember very much, no matter what I was working on when I was in my job search, I remember always feeling like I shouldn't be doing this, I should be networking, or when I was networking, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be practicing code. So having something written down, I feel like somehow took some of the like worry out of it for me.
I would like to also add, because I feel like that reminded me that I guess it's really easy to get really overwhelmed about all of the things that you could practice, all of the things you should know, could know. There's so much to learn in software engineering, and especially when you're looking for a job, it sometimes feels a little bit like I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. What do I really need to know? And I think that's also kind of why I made a slight decision of like, okay, I want to do lead code. And I know that other people have different journeys. And so some people build apps more, whatever, you know what I'm saying? It's easy to get overwhelmed. And I think that if you try to focus on like what you absolutely want to do, what you are really excited to focus on, what brought you into this career change, and do that, one, it made me happy to do that. Two, I think could help maybe feeling overwhelmed if you feel the same way as me in that way.
Yeah, I think it helps to keep with the momentum to keep going. Just find the part that you like, but yeah.
Very cool. All right. So what kind of side projects and portfolio pieces did you have when applying to jobs?
Okay, I could start. I mostly worked on, I guess, a few of the bigger projects that we built in Rithm. So I had, so we learned, a few different frameworks, 2 backend, like Flask and Express, and then React. And so I tried to have a project, a full stack project for, each of those. So I had like a project of React and Express, so React front end, Express back end, and then like a full stack Flask application. I had, I think, maybe 2, I guess, projects that I got from my bootcamp that I really tried to perfect, and then I did make one myself afterwards, which I think is Flask and Express. So I would say like my advice would be to have maybe just like 1 to 2, 3, I don't know, maybe, and have them really like have them be your best work possible. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I have the same thing because Springboard is just the online version of Rithm. I'm curious, Genna, did you work in a group for it, or did you do it yourself?
Yeah, so it was like, I guess 2 of my projects, I had I don't know if you're saying Springboard was an online version of Rithm, so we may have like some very similar projects. I had one called Jobly, which I worked on in a pair, and that was a full stack application we built. And then Warbler, which was a full Flask application. Yeah. And that was with a pair as well. And like I made one myself just so I could say, hey, I made this one.
Interesting. Yeah, we had those 2 that you named, and we had to do them all ourselves, which I feel like then I lost out on the opportunity to learn how to work in a group. So that's one thing about being all online now. But my 2 projects that I did, there was one that I used an API that looks from satellite data to how dirty an electricity grid is, which is kind of interesting because my job ended up being with an electricity company. I used that API, and then I also like scraped data about appliances, and so that a user could see like how much their grid is running, like at 100% capacity or whatever, and then compare it to how much electricity they would use running their dryer or something. That was one project. Another one I did was about type 1 diabetes, using a glucose monitor to see how your blood sugar is, and then inputting meals with carbs. So you would compare like line graph to the carbs as a bar graph. So they left it up to us for those two projects, what our topic would be, and we did those ourselves.
Do you think that project helped you get hired at your company since it was like related kind of to what they're doing?
I think so. They didn't, I could tell that they had looked at my portfolio pieces because they brought it up, like the different topics, but they also talked about the diabetes one. So I'm not entirely sure, but it certainly, like, it was something I was interested in before. And I think that they liked that I'd shown interest in the field.
Genna, did you have any idea if they had looked at your portfolio?
Honestly, I don't know if I'm not fully sure. I think, I mean, year one, my interview with year one, I had to send in a project. I think that was the first technical interview, and I sent in the project that I built myself. That was just a simple game. I built like a Family Feud, like clone kind of thing, but a twist of my own. And I sent that in to year one. I'm not sure if, I don't think Carrot looked at my project though. Yeah.
How did you say you got you found out about year one? I might have missed that while I was like setting things up.
The career coach at Rithm sent us a link.
Oh,
yeah.
awesome.
So, and then I just applied. He kind of said that he spoke to the creator of year one, and that sounds really awesome. Here's a link to apply. It's, a company to help bootcamp grads find jobs.
Did any other Rithm School students get in, or is it you were the only one?
Yeah. I think 2 others of my understanding. Yeah.
Sweet. Awesome.
Okay, then. How were the first 3 months or the first couple of months on the job? Like, what were some of the first responsibilities and contributions? What was onboarding like? What's the training process been like? Or like mentorship from senior engineers?
Yeah, so my experience was awesome so far. I am actually, today is my 2-month day. I started on October 12th. It was great onboarding. The team I get to work with is really supportive. I was paired with a senior engineer on the team from kind of, in the first week, he helped me set up my local environment, or my environment on my computer to get started. And yeah, it was quicker than I expected. Carrot is a startup, about 60 people, and I released code in the first week, which was crazy and scary, but also really exciting. Yeah, I would say the support has been awesome. There's times where I've felt overwhelmed by everything that I don't know, but I've just tried to take it all one step at a time. And if I try to think about, everything, like I said, it's overwhelming, but if I just focus on the task at hand, the card I'm given, the code I have to write, it seems to all, make sense as I continue to go through. So yeah, I'm happy to answer more specific questions about it, but generally has been really great.
Do you get more support because you're coming in from the year one program, or is it?
So the way year one has been kind of for me, so I guess I could say I think I'm the first person to have gotten a job through year one. They just started their company a few months before I applied, or I'm in the first cohort, and I believe I was the first person to get a job. So my experience with them is kind of like trial and error. They're awesome, and I have gotten support. I'll reach out to Crystal from year one, and in the beginning, in the first 2 weeks, if I had any basic Git questions or even terminal questions, things that I felt like, I don't really want to ask the engineer on my team. I don't want them to think I don't know these. I would ask Crystal. Moving forward after the first 2 weeks, because I do have so much support at Carrot, I don't really need to reach out to year one. And the way we've kind of set it up is like, if I need support, I'll reach out. But they're very supportive. If I were to reach out, I get an answer in a few minutes. Like I think in the second week, I was slacking Crystal, like, what is this in Git? How do I deal with this like conflict? And she was answering me like in time, helping, which was really cool.
It's
So,
great to hear you've got all that support, and it's also really great to hear that now you feel comfortable talking to your teammates about anything that might come up,
Yeah.
right? That's what you can only hope for.
Definitely, definitely. I'm super grateful for that.
So my onboarding has been great. My immediate manager is super patient and will take any of the questions that I have. It's interesting because they knew that I didn't know any C# or .NET when they hired me, but that's what the back end is on our project. And the front end is in Vue, which isn't that different, but I haven't worked with it before. I worked with React. So there's been a lot of me, doing front end masters or just learning some C# things and making sure that I'm studying on my own and my manager is okay with that. So it's a little tough sometimes to know, especially remotely, when you should be quote unquote bugging somebody because they are also doing their work. And so I'll send them like a little message and be like, no worries, when you can get around to it, I was wondering about this, but it's hard to tell. And I was actually interested in what Sam and Braidy think when they're like helping somebody that's new. Is it like a lot to pull you away from your work that you have to do to go help somebody that's new and learning the code base?
it depends. Like that's gonna be the answer you get almost always when you ask a senior engineer a question about anything. um, so generally, it would help if the company has like a point person, like a mentor for the new person. If not all companies have the resources to do that, but you can just ask people. Like you kind of just got to feel it out first, just to see like how busy they are, like, and maybe develop a system where you like schedule a meeting once a week where you can ask questions, or you can just ask them, is it okay if I just Slack you questions? Sometimes everybody's different. People, like some people get super thrown off by like all these Slack messages like coming in. So it helps to set up one-on-ones with people. I think we talk about that a lot on this meetup, where that way you can kind of get to know people and then you can kind of figure out what's the best way to communicate with them. Just yeah, if you haven't met all the engineers yet, even if you have met them, it really helps to schedule just like 15-minute like one-on-one chat. You can even set it up to people you work more closely with once a week. So you should definitely have that with your manager, either once a week or once every other week. If they haven't set it up, you can ask them if you can set that up. And then if there's other people you work with a lot, I would recommend also setting up a weekly one-on-one. Just it doesn't have to be that long. It could just be like 10 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I should clarify, I just started a month ago. So it's been a lot of onboarding just in this month. And I did get to commit code, which is really awesome too. And a lot of stuff in Vue and one thing in C#. And I think, a lot of the work that they give me is stuff that needs to be done, but also lets me learn the code base. It's not overly complicated. So I really appreciate that too. But now I feel like I'm getting into this in-between thing where they're like, okay, well, we introduced it to you. And I'm like, well, but I might still have a question.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. It can take a long time to onboard to a company, like months.
Yeah.
It's like even for a senior engineer, it's not just a junior engineer. Like it just sometimes it's a complicated system and you just need it takes a while to onboard, especially if it's all new stuff like for you.
Mm-hmm.
C#, Vue, that's like a whole bunch of new technologies you have to learn how to use. Like I don't think they would expect you to be like just blasting out features after 1 month.
That's reassuring for sure.
And it'll just be more helpful if like, even if I still pair a lot with people on my team. We're very like senior heavy, and I'm more of like mid level on my team. I know every company can view it a little bit differently. But we like to encourage pairing so that everybody stays on the same page with like what's going on with the feature and how everything works. So as long as you're being communicative and like you can check in it if your team has retros, check in and see like
Yeah.
what are the pairing expectations. That's something we're trying to define a little bit better on our team, because we've noticed if people bounce around trying to not suck up too much time from one person, then you'll get really conflicting opinions on how to do stuff, and then you're like doing stuff and undoing stuff. And the communication and like setting expectations, I think, is the key there.
Yeah. So if you feel bad about asking questions, just communicate and ask them what's the best way
Yeah.
to ask questions. But like Brady said, a good place to bring up that question is if your team has retros. A lot of teams do like a retro at the end of a sprint. Some companies, I worked at a company where we had a retro every week. That's a good place to bring up questions, because usually in a retro you go over what went well, what went bad, and any questions like people have. So that's a good place to bring up like the best way to ask other people questions when you need help. And definitely that's something you can just ask your manager too. So when you have your one-on-one with your manager, just you can also ask them for advice about like how you should ask for help from people in your team.
Sounds good.
Cool. I guess we can move to the next question then. Do you feel like the curriculum in your boot camp was enough to be prepared for work, not including the technical interview part?
Yes. I feel like I got a good amount of information that gave me a general understanding of what I need to know on the job. So I also actually work in C# in the back end, which I did not know before the job. I do have React in the front end, so I was very familiar with React, which I think is a little bit of an easier transition. I can't imagine not really feeling familiar with the front end either, because C# feels like a complete like French compared to JavaScript and React right now, even 2 months in. But I do feel like my bootcamp gave me a good general sense of what I need to know, and I'm able to apply my understanding of, let's say, Flask that I learned in my backend to .NET and C# in the backend to an extent. Yeah, so my answer is yes.
Yeah, my answer is yes as well. I know that the question was not necessarily in the interviews, but in the interviews, they really focused on system design, but like on a junior level. And I feel like the way that our curriculum worked, I could very easily explain the flow of how I would split up the problem that they gave me. And that was something that even when I, had done courses here and there before my boot camp, I didn't have this overarching picture, and that the boot camp really filled that in for me. I didn't necessarily think about the back end and the front end and like persistent data and any of that stuff. So I really appreciated that while they taught us like the finer things, that it was a little bit of each so that we could just see the bigger picture. That was important. And when you start working to understand, just even though I don't know the whole code base, to be like, okay, this is where this is coming from. I need to look here if I'm trying to figure this out. It really helps a lot.
I feel like to add, I kind of relate it to, I remember in high school and college, through high school, I was always learning Spanish, was like the class that I had. And then in college, I decided to take an Italian class. I don't know why I didn't just stick to Spanish, but when I was learning Italian, I would always count in Spanish to remember how to count in Italian. And I use that comparison just because I feel like my knowledge of what I got on the bootcamp, though it may not completely match up to what I have to do now, I'm able to use that reference to understand what I'm learning now even more, kind of thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, I think.
All right. What other resource outside of Indeed and LinkedIn did you use to find jobs?
I don't know how helpful my answer will be. I pretty much used LinkedIn in year one. That was kind of it. I reached out to a lot of people, had a lot of conversations. Like I said, cold applying really didn't get me one interview. So yeah, mostly LinkedIn in year one.
Wait, so you didn't get any, how many places did you cold apply to?
Cold apply? Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I applied to at least 100.
And you got 0 interviews?
I got no phone screens from a cold apply, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Actually, that's a lie. I got one now that I'm remembering. It was IBM actually. It was a entry level IBM role that one now that I'm remembering, I did not do well on the technical. They sent me like a I think it was HackerRank. I did terribly, but that was actually pretty early on. So that's the one that I did get, and that was like pretty close to after I graduated Rithm. Other than that, everything else I said was completely true. I did not get any interviews from cold applies.
For me, it was Women Who Code. That's actually how I got my job. It wasn't a recommendation, but just being on the Slack channel, and the lead people were constantly discussing things. And somebody said, oh, well, this hiring manager, I worked with him years ago. He's great. He put something on LinkedIn. I'd never heard of this person, so I wouldn't see it on his LinkedIn, or we didn't have a whole lot of mutuals. And without them mentioning that on the Slack channel, I wouldn't have reached out to him. And he's like, okay, let's do an interview. And that's how I got the job. So, well, you know, Women Who Code is not necessarily the answer for everyone. I just think being in Slack channels, and like this one that Sam and Brady have, and, you know, being able to apply for apprenticeships that I didn't know about. And that was really the only way that I ever got anywhere. It was either Women Who Code, their job board, or Slack channels where people were like, apply for this thing that I've heard about. And it never really was like the classic way with being recommended, but it still was like avenues that I wouldn't have heard of otherwise.
Yeah, Women Who Code seems like a really strong network. I know a lot of people from Dev Bootcamp who got involved in that community and ended up like moving pretty high up in the community and like organizing events, and now they're all like doing really well. They're like high up in like companies, and it's like they started like after Dev Bootcamp, like with working with like Women Who Code. So seems like a really strong network.
Yeah, I went in on the Slack channel and thanked them, because it seriously would not have happened if I hadn't just been like looking at what they had to say. So,
but yeah, I agree. Like explore. There's Slack communities, there's Discord communities. You can as long as you participate and just with the communities, you can get a lot of value like out of the communities. Like,
yeah, pretty much every interview I did get was through, you know, Slack, like knowing somebody sending me the link.
Because those private communities are more tighter knit. Like you feel like you're a community. So like the people are willing to help you out there. Like everyone's trying to help. Like now I'm in the Tulsa remote community because I'm just got into that program, and like everybody's like helping each other. Like anybody who asks for help, there's lots of people who like jump in, which might be harder like on public social media channels, depending how active and how many connections you have. Like on LinkedIn and stuff, like when you're starting out, you might not have a lot of connections, and then it's harder to get like strangers to help you than people from like a tighter knit community.
I see a follow-up question wondering if there's anything similar for people who aren't women. I actually don't. Can you think of anything?
well, I was going to say,
you can join our Slack.
Yeah, that's definitely where I've spent more of my Slack time with Sam and Brady's group. And then also, I don't know what city you would be referring to, but there's a React one in Dallas that I see a lot of people post about jobs and help each other out. So if you can pick a framework, I think, and pick a city, you'll find a Slack channel group that it might even be more active now that COVID is a problem, because everybody has to go online.
It helps to find what you're interested in too, because there's all kinds of communities. A big one is like Code for America. because Code for America has brigades everywhere. You can just go on Meetup and there's a GitHub. I posted it in our Slack. I gotta dig it up. There's a GitHub that lists all the tech Slack communities. I posted it in our Slack like a few weeks ago. I'm trying to get our Slack listed on there. I made a pull request. I don't think they merged it yet. But that's a great resource because then you can like just look on that list to see what community that you want to be a part of and just check it out. So yeah, there's like hundreds. So there's a lot of choices. Brady, you're muted. Are you saying something?
I'm just saying, oh no, because a bunch of people clicked on the link that I sent the wrong link. It's for my work Slack. So Gavin, Andrew, and Julio, sorry. You're in the wrong space.
I'll get it.
Okay.
Somebody just got it. Brian,
thank you.
Brian, you're hired.
I can't talk and listen and do Slack all at the same time. I'm terrible doing one thing at a time.
So we got a new employee, Brian. Make sure you set up a one-on-one with Yoel, our other employee.
Will do.
All right, I guess then we can maybe move on to the next question. What were your interviews like? What questions were asked for the phone screen and on-site, etc.?
Okay, so phone screen was mostly like, tell me about yourself. I would say all of the phone screens I did do. And then technical interviews. So let's see, I had a few. So my technical interview for year one, which I think could be helpful for a lot of you if you're interested in applying there, was just like kind of like a leak code problem. Basically, I had a Zoom with Crystal, who works at year one, and she interviewed me basically just on solving an algorithm. And that was similar to, I think, a few of the other places I had interviewed at, which was Pinterest and I think another place like WePay. There's only a few interviews I actually did do. And then for Carrot, where I work now, was actually similar to, the interviews were very similar to what Emily said, focused on kind of systems design. The technical interviews there, because I got it through year one, they didn't do any algorithmic technical interviews since I was already screened through year one. So it was mostly interviews based on how I think about designing the code, how I can communicate, you know, how I'll go towards a task I'm given. And yeah, systems design, how will you kind of design this task once you're given it, which was cool. It was different than an interview I'd ever had. And yeah, they were really focused on looking for people who asked questions when we aren't sure, right? So I'm a big person. I will always ask questions. And so I think that's why it was a good match for me throughout the interview. They just really wanted to make sure that if I was unsure of something, I didn't just try to figure it out or assume if something wasn't clear. I would ask to clarify, what is this? I don't understand what this is. If you could help me, you know, in the process of the interview. So that was a very important thing in my interview with Carrot. Yeah, I think that's, I guess, all I would say about my interview questions.
I was sort of surprised how often I've been asked to explain my projects and in great detail. They kind of prepped us for that in the boot camp, but I would say that's the question that I get the most. And I'm sure it's because that I can't talk about work from another tech job since I didn't have that experience. And so that's how, for a junior position, they were focusing to see what you've learned on your own rather than kind of like putting you on the spot with something new. So I've really had to explain both of my projects a lot, and then the systems design stuff. And with the algorithm questions, not for the job that I got now, but other interviews, nobody ever really like threw out the hardest thing that they could possibly do. And they were always like encouraging me to ask questions and giving me like little pointers and stuff. So as much as like I focused on leak code, also I found that they were more practical questions. It might have been the places that I applied, because when I did my boot camp final technical interview, mock interview, my interviewer who worked for Google, he was like, you know, keep doing leak code, that's great, but if you're going to apply for jobs in Dallas or the Midwest, I would say a lot of them aren't going to ask you these questions. They're going to ask you what happens when you type a URL into the browser or something like that. And he's like, decide what you want. Do you want to work for Google someday? Then do leak code. Do you want to work in your town that you're living in now? Probably focus on other questions. So I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, you always got to ask. It depends where you're applying to. But also to add about the projects, being able to like walk through your projects and explain the whole thing. I interviewed students at Lambda School for a while, and they hired me to interview their students at the end of the program to like kind of gauge if the students were ready to go interview with companies. And like you needed to pass that, I think, to get certified at Lambda. I don't know the exact details, but what it was, my interview was them like walking through their projects from like all the way from the database all the way up to CSS stuff. So they at Lambda, at least, they try to make sure that you can like explain the whole, like understand the whole stack, the full stack of the project, even if you didn't work on the whole thing, because a lot of times it's a team project. But you should, even though it's a team project and you didn't work on that part, you should probably still be able to understand how to explain that part of the app.
Yeah, and I see in the chat somebody asked, why do I think that's the case, that, you know, the bigger companies might do algorithms. I know they do system design too at some point, like in Facebook and stuff like that. But I think the difference in approach probably has to do with the conversation that's going on about the best way to find an employee, because you might filter out somebody that would be great at practical things once they're hired by asking them how to traverse a binary tree, and they failed at it, because you're really not doing that very much on a daily basis at your actual job. So at least with my limited experience, I see a lot of conflict on which is the best approach to find the proper fit for your company.
And also with smaller startups, they need to like blast stuff out quickly. So I think that's why they focus a lot on practical stuff, because they just want to see, can you like build this thing? We need to build this, otherwise this company's dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why the smaller startup like interviews are like way more practical. They just want to get a sense of who can like just make this thing that they need.
I think I feel like yeah, I don't know. I wonder, part of me was about to say, like, I think that places in the Midwest recognize that they want a different way to be able to hire people. But yeah, I'm not really sure why that hasn't, because I when I talk to people, I do also see that it seems like kind of a regional decision of how to hire people. So usually in a lot of ways, California is always like leading the way in how to change everything in our country. And so it is surprising to me that it seems like there's still a lot of like algorithms out there in interviews.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I think maybe because like competition, like, well, I can't stop doing this because all the other big companies are still doing this. It's made it a little bit easier maybe for things to change faster in the Midwest.
It might also be, I'm just speculating here, that a lot of the companies started like in the Bay Area were like started from people that came from like Google and Facebook and stuff. So they're bringing the culture from where they came from to those companies. So maybe that's why they still have like heavier on the algo data structure side. That's just speculation on why. But yeah, you should definitely know your fundamentals for data structures and algos. I think somebody asked, the chat's going crazy today, but I'm just scanning it real quick. Data structures, my recommendation would be definitely know like string manipulation and arrays. Because even if you're doing practical questions, you're gonna need to know that stuff. So those are definitely hands down, you have to study that part of data structures and algorithms. I think if you look in data structure algorithms courses, they usually start with like string manipulation and arrays. Other than that, I'm not like, maybe understand the basics of trees, but like I haven't seen it too much in interviews and like graphs and stuff. Like I don't know if I've ever had like a graph question on interview. I probably have. I definitely at Google had some graph questions, but I would say definitely focus on strings and arrays.
All right then. I like this question a lot. Did you learn anything from the first few interviews that you wish you had known earlier?
Yeah, I would say I learned that, I learned that asking when I'm confused is a good thing. And in the beginning, that feels like, you want to hide that you don't know something, but I learned that most of the interviews I did do, the interviewer was happy if I asked, because it showed that I could communicate what I didn't know and then could get to the, knowing it quicker rather than spending a lot of time trying to figure something out that I could have just asked, and really clarified what I don't know and what I do know. And so that they know where I am in my head throughout the interview. So, yeah, that's something I wish I knew a little earlier.
Yeah, I thought, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
I was just gonna say, I can confirm from being an interviewer, interviewing people, what you're saying. Okay, go ahead.
I thought that the feedback that I got from the first round of the job that I did get, they said you had the right answers, but you were like hesitant about it. So I think in retrospect, obviously you shouldn't pretend to know something that you don't, but it's okay to be like, I think that this would work. Maybe ask the interviewer, is there a hole in my thinking? Is there some way that I can improve on this? And kind of make it more of a dialogue back and forth, like what Genna was saying, but also just be like confident that this is your first thought and like follow through with that, instead of just being like, well, I think I would do this, and kind of like holding back. Is I think that they are looking for what you think, even if it's wrong. And if you hold back, they're not getting a good feeling for that.
Yeah, they want to see if your choice was deliberate, and it's good to explain like why you made that choice. But it's good to follow up with the questions, like you said, like just ask the interviewer if they know a better way.
My company or team always says the quote, strong beliefs loosely held. Like you have a strong belief as to what you should do, but it's held loosely because you are working with a team and the end goal is to, make the product the best possible, kind of thing. So
I like that. That's a really good one.
Yeah, that's a mantra in the industry.
And I also, just to add on to the asking questions, if you're confused, I also would encourage everybody to maybe not so much ask questions, but like talk things through and confirm that you understand it the way that the other person is meaning it. I've been in a lot of situations where I've totally misunderstood, and I've worked with people where they thought they totally understood the algorithm challenge or whatever, and went way off on a different journey than what I was expecting.
Yeah, you should definitely do that before you start coding anything in the interview.
I feel like I strongly agree, and I think you guys would agree that that leads into the job as well, right? Like if you're handed a task, it's good to let the product manager know, that you fully will understand as much as you possibly can before building it, rather than like assuming a bunch, building something and then showing it and it's not what they expected at all.
Yeah. I ask a lot of questions before I start building stuff.
Okay, so this next question here, even though nobody really ever feels ready for interviews, how long post bootcamp did it take for you to feel somewhat confident?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I think that because my journey was very specific, and everyone's journey is specific to them. No journey's the same. I think because it took me so long to get an interview, by the time I got them, I felt like, okay, I got this. I'm going to do it. Like I need to do well in these, because it was a fight to get them. So yeah, I think maybe right after boot camp, it felt a little scarier than after I kind of went through the fight of trying to get them. Kind of gave me that nerve to be like, all right, you got this.
Yeah, for me, I think a lot of my background in performance, and maybe Genna feels this way with dance too, that while they're very different, it changes my mindset. I know what it's like to be really, really nervous and on the spot. I did a ton of orchestral auditions for a full-time position in a symphony orchestra. So you'll like fly to another city and you get 10 minutes to play. And if you're having a bad day, you just like flew to Chicago for like no reason. And you pay for the hotel and everything. So I did a lot of reading over the years of mental practice and centering when you're really nervous. I feel like that made a big difference. If anybody's interested in that in general, it has a lot to do with sports psychology too. There's like the inner game of tennis, that's the classic one, and then there's like offshoots depending on what your field is that you can look into that. There's a music specific one, but it's called the Bulletproof Musician website that you can check out. And some of it I'm sure wouldn't be interesting to people in tech, but there's other things of like how to quiet your self-talk. Like I would definitely, when I'm performing, I get to a section that I know is really hard, and you have to fight yourself from being like, I'm gonna mess up. And that kind of comes into interviews too, of like, you could say to yourself, well, I don't know that, so I'm not even going to try. Or just knowing that these things will come up and dealing with them, it doesn't take it away, but I really enjoy reading about that stuff.
I would also add, I love what you said about like, feeling put on the spot, that I tried to put myself in as realistic of a situation as possible. So it's like easy to like think about what you would do or practice, coding when there's no pressure. But if I could put myself in a situation like have, a friend of mine interview me or watch me code or something like that, it kind of helped me as I was in it to be like, all right, I've done this kind of, and it relates to almost performing as a dancer. It's always easier to balance on one leg when no one's watching. But once you get on the stage and there's lights in your eyes, it's really hard. It feels impossible. So to kind of put myself in the same position as I possibly could helps.
I love that analogy. It is so true. It's something that it's like a muscle that you have to just exercise. I do not have that much experience in trying to like control my anxiety or like whatever you get when you feel like you're being judged in an interview, but it is it's totally worth looking into all of that.
Yeah, that's why all the services like Pramp and stuff are great too.
Mm-hmm.
Practicing with a friend is a good step, but then the next step will be practicing with a stranger, because that's a little more real. You don't have as much pressure because you're not thinking about this is gonna get you the job or not, but it's still, I get nervous when I do Pramp with other people. It's just like a stranger you're practicing with.
All right, this next one here is about salary. So I'm reading through the whole thing, and it says that they've applied to a few places that ask for desired compensation. So they're wondering like what sort of salary range should they be expecting, or what resources did you use to find it? I have my own opinion of like what to do when a place asks for desired compensation. We can get to that at the end.
So yeah, I don't have good advice for what to do when asked about a salary. I wasn't asked, but to like prepare for that as I was going into interviews, I really just asked people in my network that have, that are software engineers or even junior software engineers. Like I have a really awesome mentor I was paired with for Rithm, and she gave me good advice. I reached out to the career coach, just people that I trusted in the industry, and asked, what I should expect.
Yeah, I definitely was surprised about when it came up in the interview. So I would suggest having thought of it before, even if you just think you're having like a preliminary talk with a hiring manager or something, have that number in mind, because I just like blurted out something and then I had to go back and be like, yeah, I just was caught off guard. Can we actually discuss this? Which was harder. And I also went to the career coach at Springboard and asked for help. So in retrospect, I definitely should have thought of that before, even though I didn't think it was going to come up in that particular conversation.
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's I just posted a link for levels.fyi, but those are for like the bigger, well-known tech companies. So if you're shooting for the stars, that's a good one to look at. And you can look at Blind App. Just be caution. It can be a little toxic in Blind App because everybody's anonymous or pseudonymous. I think you need a work email to get into Blind, though. I don't know if they changed that. But people talk about salary all the time in there. Glassdoor, you can always look at. So there's just a lot of different resources. You can just ask straight up on social media. You can ask your networks, whatever networks you're in. Like if you're in a bootcamp network, it's a good chance somebody from your bootcamp is at one of those, at some company. If you're at a bootcamp that's been around for a while, at least. So any network you're in, just make a post saying if anybody has an idea of what the salary ranges are.
Yeah, and then I was just gonna say, like, try to delay as long as possible if they're asking you for a range.
Yeah, it's hard though.
Yeah.
Like most people will tell you not to like give them a number, but it's like hard.
Yeah.
Because they're more experienced than you and they know how to make you like go first. But I think you can also ask them what the pay range is for the position.
That's actually, yeah, I love that. Turning it around on them. Mm-hmm.
Because usually they usually have a range for the position, and like you can just you can gauge like based on your skill set, like where in that range like would be appropriate for you. But that it's kind of scary to ask that question, so but it is an option.
Alrighty, so here, moving on to the next question. Did you ever doubt it was going to work out?
Whew, that one. Absolutely. I mean, we are, changing our lives around for this, and it's scary and it's hard, Software engineering is not an easy job. It's great and I love it, but it is hard. You go through time. I mean, I at least went through different days of, can I actually do this? Am I good enough? Definitely has happened throughout the job search, through the boot camp, even now in my job, sometimes I think like, am I good enough? But you are, and you've gotten to where you are now. And that doubt definitely comes in, but keep going because there's a reason you started. And there's a reason why you're doing it, because it is an awesome career. But yes, yep, I did doubt that if it would work out, but it did. And I think it's, you know, about momentum and remembering why you started. Yeah, you got this.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely worried about that. I think my focus was on diversifying what skills I had. So I still, when COVID is over, I'm still going to perform, and maybe someday I'll get back into violin teaching and things like that. And so I was thinking of it as like kind of collecting what I had to offer. And I think in my mind, I was like, even if it's just like little side projects that I get paid $500 to make a website for somebody, at least I'm learning something that has value to me and trying to like bring it to what I want out of it, rather than, is this going to work out, that I'm going to get my dream job? Because then I just can't like handle those thoughts. It's too much. So just like, hey, I still am going to perform or whatever I've been doing before, and I want to have a new skill set, and this is really cool stuff, and I'll just see what happens. And I really tried to keep the extra out.
Yeah, I know. I definitely doubted it was going to work out for me too. I think it's natural to worry about that. All right, next question here. How comfortable should you be in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript before attending a coding bootcamp to get the most out of it?
I would say JavaScript as comfortable as you possibly can be. That's, at least for me, what I interviewed in to get into Rithm. So I practiced only in JavaScript. I wish I had any knowledge at all of CSS and HTML before starting the bootcamp. I was a little overwhelmed with the pre-work. I didn't look into it. I really didn't know a lot of CSS or HTML at all before I started bootcamp at all. So I would say just a little bit, like, familiarize yourself with those, but definitely, yeah, and my advice is a bit more focus on JavaScript.
Yeah, I think that they often offer a course that you can do to get yourself up to speed. So they would know, I think, the level for that boot camp. And just taking advantage of all the free resources that you can find, or the cheap ones, like the Udemy courses. Like that, I picked Springboard because I really liked Colt Steele, the teacher. I think he's awesome. And he has a Udemy course that you can get for $11 when it's on sale. And a lot of the content is the same. And, you know, just as much as you can on your own before you're like, okay, this is really what I want to do. And then you pay for the whole experience.
Yeah, I think it depends on the boot camp that you're going to. Most boot camps have like a certain expectation of what you need to know, and I think a lot of them make it clear. So like people are posting links, like Rithm School has free courses. Most courses have prep work. I think App Academy posts their whole curriculum, but they also probably have like what you need to know before you go to the boot camp. A lot of them do webinars too, and they to let you know what you gotta do. And Career Comma, if you're not in that, I think that's a good place that helps you figure out this kind of stuff. I just posted a link. They just raise a bunch of money too, so this is going to be there's a really strong community. If you're looking for a community, and I would recommend Career Karma. I'm not in it myself, but I just read a lot about it. I'm trying to get one of the co-founders to be on this happy hour. I haven't figured out how I send them a code email, but I just guessed the email, so I don't know if he even got it. But they help you figure out like what bootcamp to go. So they probably can also help you figure out what you need to know to get into the bootcamp after they help you figure out what bootcamp to go to. They do all kinds of stuff too. I think like they partner with people to like help you get a laptop, like if you can't like afford a laptop to go to boot camp and stuff like that.
I'm just gonna remind people there's still a couple people trickling into the wrong Slack space. So do not click on the Slack link that Brady posted. It is wrong.
Oops. Too bad you can't edit the chat in Zoom.
I know.
People at your work are gonna be like, what?
Uh-huh.
How did people get this link?
Oh man. All right. Well, let's go back. Thank you, Brian. That's the correct link that just got posted. It says Developer Army in the URL. All right. What do you think helped you get to the interview stage without any actual job experience? How did you stand out from all other applicants?
I guess I would say I did do, I don't know, this is a hard one for me. I think maybe, yeah, the way I got my interviews was through kind of referrals. So in order to get an interview was, I spoke with somebody I knew or was sent a referral link. Yeah, and like I said, a few times got carrot through year one. I guess what helped me get through the interview process at year one was, I built an app myself that, was full stack, and I didn't work in a group, and they liked that app. I hope that's a helpful answer.
I think that first of all, I definitely applied to a lot of things that I never heard anything. So, a lot of times they don't, they maybe have a referral that they're more interested in. And I was just like, well, maybe they didn't even look at my application. But the interviews that I did get, it always boiled down to the projects, and also that I picked things that were important to me or interesting to me, with the electricity one, and then the diabetes one. My 4-year-old daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So being able to speak to things that were interesting to me definitely was a way that people wanted to continue the conversation.
You just reminded me, I'd also like to add that there are companies out there that are interested in bootcamp grads. They want people with, diverse backgrounds. And in the beginning, I think I was fighting to apply to companies that weren't looking for me. And eventually I realized that, I want to work for a company that wants me and that wants, my diverse background, and a software engineer with, my experience.
Apprenticeships are great for that, because the apprenticeships are the bigger companies who are trying to bring on the people with the non-traditional backgrounds. So I highly recommend just paying attention, because these things get announced and you gotta apply quick, because 1,000 people will apply and they will just shut it down in 2 days. So I posted some in the Slack. There's a recent Twitch and another company, Blend, announced apprenticeships through OnRamp. I highly suggest people follow OnRamp on LinkedIn. I noticed they don't have that much followers. So yeah, I follow them. I knew about them since they started, because people from Dev Bootcamp are involved in starting OnRamp. So I knew about it since they were born, since the company was born. So now it's starting to pick up. They're starting to announce more apprenticeships. Their whole thing is to partner with companies to encourage them to start these, and they help them start these apprenticeships. So they started with Pandora and I forget whatever other company, and this, now they got Twitch, and that'd be huge. I think Twitch is gonna be a gigantic company. I mean, it already is, but I think they're gonna be really huge.
Cool. So, and I mean, yeah, I also love apprenticeships, and don't forget, if you're out networking to people, ask if their company has an apprenticeship or they know of apprenticeships. I think some companies don't really advertise them very well.
I'd also sorry, I thought you were going to switch to a different question.
I was. Go ahead.
Okay. I also like to add, year one, I keep speaking about it, but like I said, I got my job through year one, and what's really cool about them is that any company that works with year one is looking for bootcamp grads, looking for somebody coming from a background like ours. So Carrot was specifically looking for someone like me, which is just really cool too. You're paired with a company that wants you just as much as you want them.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, this next question then. How important has it been to understand legacy code syntax?
I'm not sure what that is or what you are asking. Is that maybe specifically to Emily, that question?
Sorry. Again, I'm not good at multitasking. I got pinged. I guess in your job, how important has it been to understand the legacy code, like the code base that you're jumping into, is the way I'm interpreting that question.
Okay, like how important has it been to understand the code base?
I think so.
Rather than just writing like new code,
Oh, okay.
You're jumping into an existing code base. Like how hard is that? Or how important is that skill?
I would say, yeah, it's a big part of my job is understanding what I'm reading. And, instead of just jumping in and writing something new, I spend time trying to make sure that I'm following the same patterns that the team is following, right? Instead of kind of messing up the code, I want to keep it at a good place and use their patterns. So understanding the code base, understanding, the pattern they use, the syntax they use, and all of that, in my opinion, is very important.
Yeah, and I'm finding that even if I found my particular spot of code that I need to work on at the work code base, if I don't have like an overarching idea of what is happening in their code base, I felt like I was floundering around. Like obviously at first you're not going to, and my questions were always like, so how is this tied to this code base and where are we getting this from? So I think it's, at least for my mental model, I had to ask a lot of questions. Otherwise I didn't feel comfortable. I felt like I was like on an island by myself. And I think that that's just going to come with more time too. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, you don't need to understand all the code, but you should understand, be able to like know how to ask questions about it to, so that you use the same patterns. Because like when you work in a code base, there's usually, you develop conventions and patterns that you use. So you want to learn those. You don't want to just make your own new pattern, then it makes the code harder to follow. But some code is just gnarly and you don't know what it does. I worked in a code base once and there was a function called stare into the abyss and nobody on my team knew what it did. It was just this crazy big function that did important stuff. So none of us wanted to touch it. And then I guess the people knew it was gnarly code, whoever wrote it, and they just called the function stare into the abyss.
Oh no.
Like
so
it
scary.
probably refactored it. I'm sure it was somewhere else and they're like, let's just hide this somewhere. They probably didn't even know what it is. Like if I'm speculating why they did that, they probably didn't know. And they're like, let's move this over here and not look at it anymore. And we'll just call it stare into the abyss because I don't know what it does. That's my guess as to how that happened.
Yikes. All right. Next question here. When looking for a job, which method worked the best for you? LinkedIn, directly emailing, networking, asking for a referral?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of talked about this a little. What worked best for me was, networking, talking to people, asking for a referral, a link, that kind of thing.
Yeah, my experience with networking, but not with referrals, just being there for the dialogue of what was going on and who was looking to hire. I think if I just find like a random job application, on LinkedIn, I didn't have a whole lot of luck with that. And also, like with the Women Who Code job board, which anybody can access, you just go to their website. Those, I got a lot of response that way too. Like, even if it didn't go anywhere, at least I got an email that they got my application or something. Whereas with LinkedIn, it would just kind of be staring into the abyss. There wouldn't be any answer a lot of times.
Do you think it's just because the companies they pick to list on the job board are just better at doing that, or?
They sell the job board as, or not sell it, but they explain their Women Who Code job board as being transparent. So they give you a salary range right at the very beginning.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I think that they're challenging the companies to be serious about it. And somehow that actually works in some weird way.
Awesome. This question is about year one. Is year one a paid service? Do they charge money, and what do they charge if they do?
Nope, they don't charge anything at all. Yeah, that was a question I had for them in the final interview with the founders. It seems like too good to be true. That's kind of what I felt too, but you don't pay anything at all. You just interview behaviorally, technically, and then, they source you out to really awesome companies. That's pretty much what it is. Yeah, it's cool. So you don't pay anything, and you don't share any salary or anything with them.
They probably get paid from the companies, so they're not going to charge your job seekers. Same thing with on-ramp, I think, is the same way. I'm not 100% sure though. I don't know all the details. We got to get somebody on from on-ramp too.
All right, moving along then. Do any of you, or maybe will you, have on-call responsibilities? And how much DevOps do you have to do, if any? If you're not familiar with it, then I guess it's none.
I will eventually have on-call responsibilities. Our company is in a very, very, very busy season right now, but come the beginning of the year, I'll start to be on call. Yeah, and I don't have any DevOps responsibilities.
So what does on-call mean for you then?
Sorry, yeah, I could have explained that a bit better. So each engineer on the team kind of rotates and takes a week that, and they take on like the on-call responsibilities. So I have not been on call yet and haven't really gotten a lot of information about what it entails, but I think it has a lot to do with we have a credit card that's attached to the company, and the on-call engineer handles any kind of complications that could happen in the code based on charges, that credit card, things like that. But I don't know that many specifics about it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be hard to know the specifics until you've been through it a few times.
Yeah, for me, they have a specialized DevOps team that I, being all remote, I haven't had any contact with at all. And so I don't have to handle any of that. And my team isn't going to do any on-call things. It's the finance team, and we do handle billing, but I think it's not something that if it breaks, we, need to be right there to fix.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, would you recommend studying data structures and algorithms before attending a boot camp, or focusing more on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript?
I guess I'd have to say HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. That's just my opinion though, because data structures and algorithms, at least for me personally, would have been a lot to try and focus on before the bootcamp. I don't know that I was mentally there to even understand what I was studying. If I were to start, trying to traverse a tree or something like that before, or like a linked list before the bootcamp, that's something I think that as I went through the bootcamp and learned more and just got more experience, was able to take on.
Yeah, I would agree too.
Yeah, I would agree also. And it's funny because the very first online course that I did was on Coursera, and it was University of Toronto's intro to computer science. And it was a really great course, but when they got to the sorting algorithms, I'm like, why would I want to do this? Like, I don't know. I've never built anything where I would use an array. So like, what is this for? So I felt like until I started even building something really small and seeing what you would do with those things, I didn't really care about anything that was a data structure or, you know, more advanced concepts like that.
Yeah, even in computer science curriculum, like I have a computer science degree, and you learn data structures and algorithms after you learn how to code. Like it's in the middle of like the program where you take the data structures and algorithms course. Your first course is like introduction to programming at university. So there you jump straight into writing like for loops and defining variables and stuff like that. So for bootcamp too, like I think even like the prep work, I don't know what the prep work is like now, but I think most of it, at least at Dev Bootcamp, Braidy might know better because they had a phase 0. I think when she went there, they didn't have that. I was like a early adopter of Dev Bootcamp. They didn't have prep work, so but.
Yeah,
Do you
when
remember what the phase 0 was, Braidy?
Phase 0, I remember doing some HTML and CSS, and we really focused on Ruby. We just kind of like touched on JavaScript. I remember freaking out after phase 1. We'd spent a lot of time on Ruby, and then they're like, okay, go teach yourself JavaScript. And we were all like, what? That's not possible. I can't do that in 2 days. But exactly with the Spanish and Italian scenario, it was like, well, we understand this concept and we can translate. But it was, I remember like, it was an introduction to like what an object is, like an object-oriented language. So we dealt with like classes and instance variables, and it was a very like high level intro to a bunch of stuff, but then we didn't dive that deep, I guess, into everything. And I do remember doing loops, like having to implement a block in Ruby in phase 0, and it was like the hardest thing in the world. My brain was not there yet. So it was good that I guess I had some exposure to that before going into the boot camp. But that wasn't the focus at all. I agree.
Yeah, because boot camps are mostly focused on web development. So the basics of web development is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you go to university, that's the degree is not web development, right? It's computer science. So it's different. Most boot camps, I think, it'd be best to prep HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then some of them teach CS fundamentals, which includes data structures and algorithms in the program. Some boot camps are shorter and they don't have time to cover that. So it's up to you to just teach yourself when the program's done. But it'll be easier because then you have a foundation in JavaScript or Ruby or Python. Then it will help you learn the data structures and algorithms, especially if you're doing like courses and stuff. Usually you gotta be proficient in at least one language.
Yes. All right, moving on then. This next
how many
question.
More questions you want? It's like 1:30 now, Braidy. How much more questions you want? All right, Genna and Emily, how are we doing on time with you?
That's the big question.
I'm fine. I don't have to go.
I can stay for at least another half hour. I have to leave by 2.
Okay. Maybe we do a few more questions, Braidy, and then we can do the more informal conversation.
Sounds good. This here is asking if any of our companies are still hiring.
Like the companies we're working for right now.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, right now Carrot isn't hiring engineers, but I know that for a fact in the future they will, maybe like, I don't know, a few months, and definitely past the new year, but eventually they will. They're growing very fast, so we should definitely stay in contact.
Yeah, and my company is hiring. They want people in the Dallas area because after COVID, they want to have us at least some days of the week in person. But anybody can send me a LinkedIn message or on the junior developer happy hour, and I can put you in touch if anybody wants to interview.
Yeah. And a suggestion I would make too, pay attention to companies raising money, because usually after they raise money, they start hiring a lot. Like if you look, Code Signal just raised like 25 million. Now they're hiring a bunch of people. Might be a good time to look to see if they have entry-level positions. I didn't look, but I pay attention to all the companies raising money.
Do some networking.
Career Karma just raised a lot of money, so maybe they even like hiring engineers. I'm not sure, but it like helps to. That's one way a company's going to be hiring. Usually that money is going to be used heavily to hire engineers.
That's a good point. Yeah. And Nordstrom. So I still feel very removed from like Nordstrom. I don't really know what their hiring process is. It still feels like I'm just a trunk club employee. So I'm not really sure what Nordstrom is doing. I know that it's a big company and there's a lot of teams in their tech department. But Trunk Club is not hiring just yet. I've heard that we might be hiring sometime in like February, but I don't know for what positions or what levels. But at some point in the next year, we are trying to beef up our apprenticeship program. So once I have information, I'm definitely going to post it in the Slack channel. Let you all know first. I'll post it in the Developer Army Slack channel, in the right channel. Okay. So here, when you say Rithm School is a more front end or back end focused school, do they do a good job on keeping it evenly focused?
Yeah, I would say mostly they do a good job of keeping it evenly focused, but a little bit more of an emphasis on front end. Yeah. We had a good amount of experience in like building APIs, but a lot of experience in React and JavaScript, that kind of thing. So an emphasis on front end, but we did get a good amount of back end exposure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the curriculum's almost the same. So it was the same for me too.
I think Dev Bootcamp was pretty balanced. What do you think, Brady? Dev Bootcamp doesn't exist anymore for people that don't know. Me and Brady both went to Dev Bootcamp.
I think it was balanced, but I didn't.
I mean, phase 1 was all in the command line.
Yeah. I whenever I've thought of it, I have thought that it had more of a back end lean. But there was a lot of like using Ruby in the front end. Like I think I made the mistake when I started to evaluate that of thinking like JavaScript meant front end, and we.
Oh, you mean like the ERB templates?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought it was a bummer I missed out on getting a lot of experience in JavaScript, but now I'm getting it. So
now that you mention it, I think maybe it was a little more back end. Even straight out of bootcamp, I focused mainly on back end, and maybe that's why I did mostly Ruby back end. It wasn't later till I switched to focusing on the front end.
But yeah, it doesn't exist, so. Okay, so this maybe last question. What are some of the things that differentiate the senior devs versus junior devs? What are some skills and experience you want to get to make you more senior? This will be a tough question for people who've just started their jobs.
I was gonna say, yeah, I have, I guess, one topic I would say I could talk about. And I actually was just talking to somebody at my company who's senior about it. And he was saying how he had, like, I was talking about how I wish that I, right off the bat, when I'm given, a task or something to implement our code, had more specific questions. Like, he's able to ask questions that I'm not able to right away, which I was like, oh, that's feedback for me. Like, I really want to be able to ask everything I possibly can when I'm given, a ticket, a task, build this, so that I don't have to go back to the product manager or, if it was a senior engineer who handed me the task. And as a senior engineer, he's really great at asking all of the questions, understanding like what could go wrong, what he could possibly not understand about this, about implementing it and all of that. And, I do my best, but I think that does separate like me and him as like a junior engineer right now and a senior. And it's definitely a goal of mine. That's just, one thing I could talk about.
Yeah, for me, I noticed that so our user stories will come from the business side. They know that they want to add this feature, and they have no idea how that's going to work in a technical sense. So they'll just have like this criteria, and the senior engineer will have a way of breaking that down and maybe giving me pieces of that I can pretty easily do. But they have like engineered the whole thing of what's going to change and where that's going to be. That's the biggest thing that I noticed. Like, there's a user story that came up with a credit card payment that we're going to use Chase's iframe and bring it in, the Chase Bank, and all, like, there's going to be a new endpoint for us, and then the front end part of it and all of that. And so that's not my responsibility to take on all of those pieces and figure that out. And eventually I'll be assigned this one part to contribute to that as a junior. So I think as I also understand the business more, that will also, I mean, it's not like a ticket to being a senior engineer, but that is like a huge part, at least at my company, of being more integral to the team, is just knowing what the business is looking for and all the different ways a customer might be interacting with the website. That was something I didn't anticipate before I started.
I'd also like to add timing in there. I feel like definitely separates, a junior engineer and a senior engineer, me from a senior right now. A senior engineer is really good at or mostly really good at, this should take this amount of time. And that's a really hard part of the job, in my opinion.
We're still not good at that.
That is such a hard part.
That's one of the hardest parts. The general advice, like, people give, I think senior engineers do this a lot. So it might seem easy, but like, they usually double or triple what they really think it's gonna take, because there's always all kinds of problems that come up that you didn't think about. Sometimes you need to like just start over, like after you started building it, because they ended up being the wrong decision, and like other things will come up. Like, you think you can just focus on this project, and then like other fires come up that you have to put out, and that, like, so general rule of thumb is think about it and then double or triple what you think. But it's hard when you're a junior engineer. Like, the more you just you've been in the code base and you've been at the company, the easier it gets, because then you kind of figure out like how long it takes you to do certain things.
And the longer you're in the code base, I think the more, because you're more familiar with things, you can think of different examples of like, well, how did we do things over in that other scenario type thing? And you know where to look for some patterns. The other thing that I think has come up before of a difference between junior and seniors are like the asking questions of like, why are we doing this, and like making sure that the correct work is getting done. We recently, I guess a couple months ago, we were about to try to find this really complicated way to implement the solution, and then we realized, well, actually that's like thinking of things in the old way, how we used to do things, but this other feature that we're going to incorporate, like that is not even necessary anymore. So let's just scrap a bunch of this work. And so luckily one of our senior devs proposed that, and all of us were like, oh yeah. Sometimes no work is the best answer.
That reminds me of something else I notice about, starting as a junior engineer, is that I immediately assume that I'm wrong or that I can't understand something. And as a senior engineer, I've noticed, when I'm pairing with someone who's more senior, they'll be like, actually, that code is really not readable or really not, good. And it's easy to, as a junior, assume that you're confused, but really sometimes the code's wrong or just not readable or just not great. And it's easier, I guess, with experience to be like, okay, that needs to be changed, rather than, assuming I'm wrong.
Senior engineers are also better at pushing back. So like when the product or the business people say we need to build this, senior engineers' first response is usually, no. No, we don't need to build this. That's going to make things way more complicated. And junior engineers, in my experience, will never say that. They think we have to build everything that they say. But senior engineers will push back, especially because then the good engineers will explain why, though, like why they think they shouldn't do that. So it's usually like you usually have to compromise with like product and the business people, because sometimes it is true, it'll just make it like way more complicated, and then which will cause the system to have more bugs and blow up.
We don't want things to blow up. All right. Well, I think it is getting late. I can go ahead. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Genna and Emily. It has been awesome today to hear all of your explanations and your experiences through bootcamp and job search and everything.